All right, so we'll get started. Thank you, Abner. Thank you, everyone who's on Zoom with us or Facebook Live, watching us this evening and joining us. Thank you, Gary, for making this happen. My name is McElvey Neal, Managing Editor at the Haitian Times, and I'd like to welcome all of you to our monthly conversation for June, where we will focus on social justice. Before we go into the program, we'd like to say a huge thank you to Bobby Filippo of Caribbean American Visual Cultural Preservation in Florida, and also to SUNY Downstate Medical Center in Brooklyn for their support in making this happen. That said, today we wanted to focus on social justice from the lens of someone who's really gone through the gamut with our justice system in the US. He needs little introduction, really. Everyone knows the name Abner Louima and what he stands for, right? For many of us, he's a symbol of survival, of resilience and perseverance in the face of the unthinkable. And in his case specifically, the unthinkable happens to be a crime committed by the NYPD back in 1997. It's a very traumatizing tale, so we won't spend too much time recounting the gory details of it. We'll only summarize it in brief. And so what happened is that back in August 1997, for those who don't know, the police were called to break up a fight at Club Rendezvous in Brooklyn, which at the time was a very popular night spot. In the melee, Abner was arrested and beaten in the station vehicles on the way to the station, rather. He was beaten viciously. And at the station, the 70th precinct in Brooklyn, he was brutalized, sexually assaulted in the bathroom of that station house. So those are the facts of what happened that night. And one person who was there in the days and the weeks and the years that followed was Gary Pierre, our very own founder at the Haitian Times. At the time, he was a reporter with the New York Times. And he had the opportunity to interview Abner while he was recovering in his hospital bed in the following days. And so we have that story on the Haitian Times website for you to read it if you'd like as a reprint. Please go ahead and check it out if you'd like to know the details. But for tonight, we'll focus on, for Abner, someone who's gone through such trauma, what it's been like for him to watch the evolution of the conversation around social justice, and what it's like for him to see the continued victimization of Black and Brown people in this country. Before we get started, is there anything, Abner, you'd like to say first, and then Gary will go over to you?
Well, thank you for having me today. And it's always a pleasure.
Of course, thank you. Gary, any opening remarks you'd like to make?
No, simply to say that although it's been 24 years almost, I felt like the story happened only yesterday because it was a story that would consume my life for over 2 years. And so it's great to reconnect with Abner and to talk about the past, the present, and the future.
Mm-hmm. Okay. With that said, Abner, let's go to you. Can you fill us in on what you've been up to since you moved to Florida and kind of left the limelight of the press?
Well, I was trying to move away from the press for a while, but since I've been here, I've been still doing my social works and also be there for my family. And because, you know, for me, it's very important because I'm very fortunate and blessed to be alive today. So therefore, I have to cherish every second of it, especially with my family.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And tell us a little bit about your family. Has it grown over the years? And what do you think of when you see what's happening today and watch your family expanding?
Well, I'm very blessed because my family is expanding and I'm able to live and see my second generation because I have one granddaughter and one grandson. They're just a year and a couple of months. So we can call them COVID babies because they were born during the corona.
Congratulations. So you are a grandpa now. Wow,
Yes,
that's amazing.
a proud one. Thank you.
Oh, good. Congratulations.
Thank
Well,
you.
that's beautiful. So you mentioned COVID, which is still top of mind for everyone, but also last year in the as we were going through COVID, right? We all witnessed the murder of George Floyd and all of the Black Lives Matter protests, right? That gained steam right after, as everybody just cried out for racial justice, social justice, all these different terms. What was it like for you to watch that movement at the time last year?
Uh, when it comes to Black Lives Matters movement, I believe that's one of the greatest movement that bring awareness in the entire world, not only in the United States, but anywhere in the world. And I believe it's a movement that we have to keep on because we need not only to bring awareness for everyone to know exactly what's going on, especially Black and brown people, the way they've been using us. And I believe that's one of the movement that really make others that doesn't know how to feel by being a Black or a brown person, at least have a feel what we have to go daily.
Mm-hmm. What we have to work through, what we have to go through every day. Okay.
Yes.
So then tell us, like, on a day-to-day basis, right? As a Black man, like working in Flatbush at the time, right? What was it like for you that you may see differently now that you understand race in this country and social justice that maybe you didn't realize at the time before the attack with the police happened? What are some things that, you know, you're really trying to get at with every day what we go through?
Well, every day I'm just hoping and do everything in my capacity to make sure that what happened to me never happened to anyone else. But
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, it seems like things getting worse because I'm blessed and lucky enough to live and tell my own story. But most of the others, someone else have to tell their story because the gun in the end of those that we pay to protect,
Mm-hmm.
also there's one to protect and serve.
But they're not doing that. So
No.
Gary, let's go over to you, right? Like take us back to that moment, right? Of being in the hospital with Abner at the time, like frankly, did you think that he would survive based on, the shape that he was in? And maybe talk to us a little bit about policing in New York City at the time, what that was like.
Well, I'll start with the last part of the question because I think you have to talk about the last part because a lot of people thought that Abner Louima's case was unique, but unfortunately, the only uniqueness about it is the fact that he lived. I had been covering the crime for about a year or so, and I had been following the case of Anthony Baez. He was a young man who was killed by the police in the Bronx, throwing football with his friends, hit a police car. Police officers came out. Next thing, it choked him to death. And so her his mother and many other activists in the Bronx started a group, and they would follow Mayor Rudy Giuliani all over the city, wherever he would go to meet with citizens. And that story kind of touched me a bit because I could feel the pain in these ladies' face, having your child get killed for no reason whatsoever. And so I remember it was a friend of mine from the Haitian American Alliance who called me about Abner's case. And she said something really, really bad happened. You got to do something about it. And I said, well, I can't do anything about it. First of all, you got to give me access. You got to give me more details because my editors at the New York Times are not going to take my word for this. We need receipts for this story because if what you're telling me is the truth, then we have to do more than just you just telling me this. And so uh, to my horror, I woke up the next day. Michael McAlery of the Daily News had a front page interview with Abner, and I went on overdrive there, and I told my sources in the community that, listen, I got to get into that hospital. I don't care how we make it happen because this is my story. This is our story, and I just got beat very badly, and this is not a good thing for a reporter. And so we just went and did that interview. What struck me about that interview with Abner, he of course doesn't remember it, but he was very weak. He could hardly talk. And I felt that it was courageous on his part to talk to reporters. As it turned out, McAlery and I would be the only reporter that he would talk to and give some inkling of what had happened to him. And then the community just took it from there. I mean, we had this reputation of being really revolutionary at the time. And they came out, supported the cause greatly. I mean, I wrote countless stories about marches that were held and follow-up meetings. And so I think that was also a awakening for the Haitian community, because we were still sort of like shy, despite our revolutionary reputation, but we were really shy to get engaged civically at this level, particularly since Giuliani was a very polarizing figure, and we were afraid to some extent of challenging his power. But I think a lot of people came out and said, this is not unacceptable. We are going to march, and we're going to send a strong message to the city and to the world at the time, because it was a worldwide story, as Abner said. And we just continue to this day. You know, I'm not surprised that this happened, and it will continue to happen until we have significant changes in the way policing is done in America, because the way it is currently structured, poor people are ultimately the victim of police brutality.
Abner, something Gary said, you know, about interviewing you at the hospital, you were very weak, right? Tell us like where you got the strength though to still continue to do interviews, and even till today to continue telling your story. Where do you get the strength?
I believe it's only God that can give strength, no one else.
Okay. Yeah, so like Gary said, there has to be a change, right? The way that policing is done in our communities, it's just got to be different. Can you talk to us a little bit about what you've been advocating for over the years when it comes to community policing, police brutality, and just the criminal justice system as well?
Sure. I believe we need a systematic change, but the only way we will get those changes is we cannot wait each time there's a case involve police and a civilian, and then to start protesting with Black Lives Matter and everything. We need to do it every day. We need to, those that have access to call our elected officials, make sure that they pass some laws, because without the laws, there's nothing going to change. We need to do that. And we have to make it part of our daily briefing, what we have to do. And it's a must, because if we don't do it, I can see myself today, and whenever my kids is out, I'm still thinking, oh God, my phone almost, it's like I'm thinking something going to happen to them, because I know the way they treat Black and minority communities. And it's not fair, but until that we get the systematic change that we're seeking for Congress to pass some law to make sure that we as Black or brown communities, we're going to be judged for our actions, not for our skin colors. And there will be one justice for all. It doesn't matter which are you, Black, white, purple, green, it has to be one justice.
So Abner, when you say daily, it has to be part of like just our daily life, this advocacy. What does that look like for you? You know, like every day, are you on the phone with legislators, with what does that look like every day for you?
Well, to make sure that we seek the change that we want, we have to do it daily. We cannot wait each time something happens and then we go to take this sweet protest, and then after that we leave it there. We're not going to get the change that we really seek, and until that we make sure that it's part of our life, because that's something that we live with, and we're going to continue living with. Our kids, our grandkids, going to continue living with, unless we do something about it.
Eh bien, Lima, pour moun yo tout ka pale créole, on nous dit pour yo qui ça yo pense yo ta supposé faire chaque jour. Pour dire que ti moun yo, right, ou m'a parlé, excusez.
Premier bagay, je pense que nous-mêmes, surtout parents, nous devons faire, et même si pas parents tout, à quel que soit mon chance pour parler avec les clients, c'est faire le connaître d'abord. Système nan, est en fait comme ça. C'est un crime qu'elle commet parce qu'elle est noire, ou bien il fait partie des minorités communautaires. Ils l'ont fight chaque jour pour survivre. Parce que c'est survivre, survivre. Mais il y a une chose qui est importante pour vous faire, c'est make sure vous obéissez à quelque soit situation que vous avez. Même les obéissez, ça capable de priver une victime, mais pas de chance pour vous utiliser un bagage que vous même vous fait contre vous. L'important, les policiers étaient anti-noirs surtout, que vous avez raison ou pas raison, tout ça le dit, vous obéissez avec lui. Et puis après, les gens si c'est habit qui c'est civil complet review board, côté ou cal porter plainte pour police qui défend un bagage, côté que gen l'autre monde qui capable à faire avocat pour ça tout. Et puis comme ça, je pense que ça capable aider nous save un peu life surtout dans noir pas nous.
Je comprends ça. So on our glass, what Abner is saying is essentially he urges parents and people in the community to comply when we're interacting with the police, because the main goal is to survive the interaction. He was saying, you know, for if we feel like we're mistreated, we can always take it to a civil complaint review board or have an attorney represent us to complain against the police officers involved. But in the moment of the interaction, it's really about survival. Is that right, Abner?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I'd like to weigh in on what Abner just said. Of course. I used to be posted at the police headquarters when I worked as a reporter. And then I befriended many cops, mostly Black cops and Haitian cops. And one of the things they told me was that exactly what Abner just said. Do not do anything because ultimately you're going to be victimized. What you need to do, the way to de-escalate the situation, is start responding by saying, yes, Officer Hernandez. Yes, Officer Hernandez. Just repeat the name. Then you kind of got in the cop's head because that's sending a message that I know who you are. And I share this with my son in particular, but that's a very effective way. And the other things that they told me is that when something happened and it gets big in the media, we get the false sense that the police has closed ranks around that cop. That's not right. They actually don't. That cop is banished and bad things happen to that cop, despite the fact that the police brass would not admit to that. But you see, so in many ways, that cop is already in trouble without us knowing that. So just, especially for the young men, just chill. I know the ego, you want to talk back, but what we need to do is just diffuse the situation. And like Abner said, report it to the authorities, to the Civilian Complaints Board, to Internal Affairs, then they'll take it from there.
If I want to add something.
Sure.
It's something that I'm preaching all of the Black kids to do, but I know it's not easy. Because when you know that you're right, you're not wrong. When somebody validates your right, trust me, you want to stand up for yourself. But that's a fight that you cannot win. And you have to know how to survive it. And after, you'll do whatever you have to do.
So that's what you tell them when you meet with kids, with young people all over the place? Because I know you've done, you've spoken to different groups and met with different councils here and there. Is that, what has come out of that over the years, do you think?
Well, I believe that it's going to take some time to see the full change, but it did make a difference because some of the kids knew it's not about them, it's about surviving. And the only way for to survive, that's you got to do whatever you have to do to survive.
Let's talk a little bit about like the use of video today, right? Like were only able to see what happened to George Floyd, no one would have believed it otherwise, right? I mean, in your case, Abner, like people are just like, no, that's crazy. Like that didn't happen, right? Do you think that video and social media and all just the different ways we have of communicating um, can also make a difference? Have you seen
Definitely.
that? Mhm.
Most definitely, because not only sometimes they used to lie and try to cover up the story, whatever they've done, but now because of the videos and every telephone have a video, they record them. Sometimes you have voice also. So basically, they make it very hard for them to lie to cover up.
Mhm. Mhm.
Let me add
Would you
something
like
about
to
the
that?
cover up because I think that was a really important point that Abner just brought up because there was a cover up working on his case. I was sitting at my desk. My editor came by and told me that he had gotten a tip about the night.
Mhm.
Apparently, it was gay night at the Club Rendezvous.
Mhm.
I looked at him straight in the eyes and I said, Jerry, are you kidding? I said, I'm not saying that there are no gay Haitians, but we're not at the point yet where we're gonna have gay night at a nightclub. No, we're not there yet. This is nonsense. I said, I don't know where you got that, but I'm not gonna follow this lead because it's gonna lead me to nowhere. But then when you think about it, now I understand clearly why they were trying to float this idea. They felt like if they floated it to the New York Times and we ran with it, then of course every other major outlets will be running with that same story. But what it was is that they knew what they had done. So if they say somehow it was gay night, so it was a justification to cover up what they had just done, thinking that Abner was going to die. And so they had a great cover up story, but unfortunately for them, it didn't work out that way. The truth came out eventually.
Mhm. Mhm. Abra, did you hear about this rumor yourself at the time,
Yes, I did.
and what went through your mind at the time, or how did you and your family react to that rumor?
Well, he wasn't doing anything to me because I know that was the truth,
Mhm.
and they were just lying to cover up. And also, I remember back in my day while I was in the hospital, and there was a reporter that was asked my wife about me by being gay, stuff like that. What does she think? She said, "Excuse me, look at me." And that was the answer that she gave. And I remember that, and I smiled when I heard that. But like Gary said,
Yes.
we not we cannot say there's no Haitian gay, but we not there yet to have an open nightclub that we're gonna have gay club now.
Yeah. They
That,
just missed the mark culturally there.
that was a famous interview with Ted Koppel on Nightline when your wife said that. And
Yeah,
Yeah, where Madam Abnet dit, eh bien, nous pas wem, est-ce que pas wem? And Ted Koppel was like, yes, I see you. I'm looking at you right here. It just didn't translate very well, but it was hilarious. But like, let's talk a little bit about your wife and your whole family, right? Because what you're saying is not only were you brutalized physically, then there was this whole like plot to try to victimize you like mentally, emotionally, and also get to your family, right? So how did you continue to survive that? How many of these rumors did you have to deal with over time?
well, we spend a lot of time dealing with the rumors, but we know that we have to keep our heads up, and
Mhm.
the truth gonna come out one day, regardless. Because the same way you see, it take a couple seconds for Eli to cross the world, but it's gonna take a long time for the truth to come out. But it will come out eventually because it's the truth.
That's true. That's true. And so then let's move to, when the truth came out, like in the courtroom, right? And the officers were, two of them were found guilty, and we moved on to like the civil settlement and all of that. How did it feel when that verdict was read in the courthouse for you?
Oh, I definitely feel vindicated, and also I didn't believe that justice was served for me, but because of justice was served in my case, although it wasn't exactly what I was expecting, because I'm
Mhm.
sure that if I was a white man, they will get more time. But at least we do get partial of justice, and we have to thank God for that. And also, they still can use that case as an example for other cases that coming up. And
Yeah, yeah. Gary, tell us about, the courtroom, not just the drama, but the lessons from the criminal justice system that you took away from covering that case as it went through the courts?
Well, that case is almost was almost similar to the George Floyd case because it was so craven. It was unspeakable.
Mhm.
Uh, and so the courtroom, I think everyone was expecting what the verdict because there was no other way. There was nothing else to find. Uh, Justin Volpe, never forget his name.
Mhm.
It
Charles
just
Cross was the other one.
he was destined to go to prison, and he did.
Mhm.
Because for somebody to be a sworn police officer to do something like that, and there was something else that he said. He told Abner, you're gonna respect white people," or something to the expect. "I'm gonna make you respect white people." And this is when he took his stick, his baton rather, excuse me,
Mhm.
and shoved it in Abner's mouth and broke several of his teeth. So there
Mhm.
were other things that happened even before he did that, the unspeakable. So in many ways, all of these things came out in the court during the trial, and it was a very tense moment. It was very quiet. Well, courtrooms are often quiet, but you could feel the tension in the air. And when the verdict came out, I don't. There was no celebration like we did now. It's just like finally justice has been served, and we can move on and put this behind us as a singularly unique incident in the history of the NYPD.
Mhm.
But we see things are still happening.
There's always a risk going into pregnancy. My biggest fear was my age, because I'm 45, but God had another plan for me. A clinic, La Sante Health, they transferred me over to downstate because I was too far gone in my pregnancy. So they recommend that I see the OBGYN, Dr. Pardo, at SUNY Downstate.
Ms. Boxell was referred to us from one of the community clinics that we partner with. When it came close to delivery time, we on ultrasound found that the baby was actually head up. And so to be able to have a vaginal delivery safely, the baby has to be head down. And she really wanted to avoid having to have a C-section if that can be done safely.
We're really committed to reducing the high rates of cesarean sections here at our institution. One of the ways we do that is that if babies happen to be their position, the head is not down, we do a procedure that's called an external cephalic version, and that really allows patients to have a trial of a vaginal delivery.
Dr. Grutel was the attending physician, and she was very calming. She made me relax, and she said, "Look, it's gonna be over in 20 minutes." And 20 minutes, it was over.
We were very happy to be able to support her in her pregnancy and her delivery, and then also in the care of her healthy newborn as well.
I'm a living testament that miracles do happen.
Yeah. So let's talk about that, Abner. Like, do you remember a particular case after you had gone through all of your trauma, right? And everyone is saying, okay, this is like the worst of the worst that we've seen. Surely the police are going to turn a corner and police differently. Do you remember when you started just thinking, oh my God, it's going to keep going the way that it has been before?
Well, every day that something happened that involved with police, and that bring me back the same day, that knowing that I could be one of them, but I was lucky and blessed to be alive today, because I'm no better than them. Just God want me to live and to survive, and I don't take it for granted. That's the reason why God chose me as a voice for the voiceless, those that have a voice, or those that gun on the head of the police that cannot speak for themselves. I have to be able to speak for them.
Mhm. And so so Gary, tell us, right, from your standpoint, what was the feeling like in the media and just, you know, academic circles, the strategists who look at community policing, where was their head, you know, when the Louima case closed as far as policing?
Well, I think again, folks were quite happy that the verdict was guilty, and I, since I'm not in the academic world, I'm not sure what the criminologists and how they processed, studied Abner's case. Well, one of the things I must say to, I don't say this quite often, but to Giuliani's credit, he realized that he had a problem on his hands, and he put together a blue panel on community policing after the Abner Louima incident. Raymond Joseph of the Haiti Observateur was one of the panel. And one of the things that came out of it, it was that there was a strong effort for the NYPD to diversify its rank. And the Haitian community, I suppose, benefited or from it. You know, we became very good friends with a lot of Haitian American cops. I got a better sense of a cop's life and his or her challenges through that. And then we have friends, and I call them friends because they are friends still today. That's why now you see that in Central Brooklyn's 3-man police precincts, the commanding officers are Haitian. Now, does that change anything? I don't know. We'll have to see in the coming years. They just got appointed last year, I think. Recently, we wrote a story about that in the Haitian Times. So we're hoping that this could be a positive lesson. It took 24 years, but here we are.
So, right, so here we are, and we're seeing, you know, George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, all these people, right? And every time for you, Abner, it's like, that could have been me, right? So tell us what you would prescribe then. What do you want to see happen with the police who are not only involved in these crimes, right? But what can actually make a difference in your mind so that they don't resort to that type of behavior of, you know, attacking and killing people?
First, I believe they have to retrain the police. That's for sure. And also, they need to hold the police accountable for the actions. If they're involved in a crime, not only they should lose their pension, they should go to jail and pay for the action. And when that happens, you're going to see less crime that involve police brutality. Because I'm tired sometimes listening to some police officers that say, well, they put their life in the line every day for us. No, it's a job they choose to do. Nobody put a gun on their head, tell them they want to become a police, they want them to become a police officer or something like that. No, my brother is a firefighter. I never heard him complain one day that he put his life on the line for others, because that's his job. He getting paid for that, and he never complained about it. But most of the time I heard that police complaining, using that word, well, we put our life on the lines for them. No, I disagree with that fact.
So you're saying they should go to jail and lose their pensions, number one. But how do we, I guess it's hard to say, how do you keep them from fighting that concept, right? Because they feel like they shouldn't have to lose their jobs or lose their pensions, that it's in the line of defense or line of fire or whatever it is. So whatever happens, happens. Gary, can you weigh in on that mentality a little bit from what your police friends have shared over the years?
Well, police culture is unique, and unfortunately, I never got behind that line to really understand it from that standpoint. But I agree with Abner in many ways, is that sanitation workers have dangerous jobs, but they do their job. But the issue of policing is really complicated, because on the one hand, you need the police to do their job, right? But what we're talking about is police brutality. Those are two things. It's always like, you know, you have good reporters who follow ethics and rules, and you have bad reporters who don't follow the ethics and the rules. Well, in our profession, we have ways to dealing with them. We don't give them jobs. And the police culture. They need to root out these guys, and I think that's part of the problem. I've had bad experiences with police officers, but I'm glad that I was older and wiser, and to know that, okay, this is not going to end well, dude. You need to relax and make sure that you don't come out of this wrong side of this. But beyond training, I think it's a question. It cannot be a us versus them mentality, because as you know, McAvee, the guys in the Alifu we interact with, they were nice guys. I mean, they were a really nice guys. They were just doing their job, and they did their job.
Yeah, they were people, regular people.
Exactly. And that's what I want us to understand that as well, because we're talking about specifically about bad police officers, which there are too many.
So then, tell me, Abner, what do you think of the whole idea of defunding the police then, which gained so much traction after last year?
Well, for me, I don't think that's going to be solving the problem. Defunding the police, because regardless, although you have bad police that's really not doing what they're supposed to do or what they're wanting to do, but we need the police. We live in a society that we cannot live in a just be police for ourselves. We definitely need the police. But it's the way they're policing that's the problem. It's the way they've been training. Like, it's like sometimes you may be blessed or lucky, you never really get involved with it, even for a little traffic stop. The way the police treat you, it doesn't treat everybody the same way. When you take, by example, this stop and frisk, you could see 2, 3, 4 white motorists passing by, they don't stop them. When they get to you because you black, they stop you, they ask you all kind of stupid questions. And sometimes you get irritated, and you have to understand that. And whenever I got a chance to speak to the police academy, sometimes I will just issues with them. I tell them exactly, this is how blacks feel about what you guys. This is the reason why sometimes we not even want to comply with their order, because the way they're policing. And some of them, they understand that. Some of them doesn't even realize that was the problem. For them, it was normal, it was okay.
And what do you tell them? Qui sont dit le wa fait training dans police academy avec
En pile fois depuis vous invité moi même toujours fait connaître exactement réaction qui est là quand un black ou bien une minorité. Parfois qui censé pas vle obéir au derrière. Premièrement mon nan getan depuis le police a getan perd déjà parce qu'il pense la vie là danger.
Yes.
Premier bail qui paraît devant c'est la mort ouais devant. Li getan paniqué à cause qu'il sont panique bout là qu'on y a parfois bon même mon vieux question posé il va me tendre son posé là le ba on n'importe réponse même. Parce qu'il getan en panique mode depuis le war, il pas obligé comme ça. Au contraire, là où on police a uniforme sur lui, où tu dois feel safe. Au lieu pour c'est de way.
Yeah, if mon gan pile mon yo déparler vraiment oui peut yo dit depuis la police, right? Okay, so then let's move, Gary, let's get your thoughts on that, right? Like retraining the police, like actually teaching them what it's like for people to be stopped
but
doing an interaction, right? Like what can you add to that? And then we'll go to some questions because there are a few in the chat.
I'm sure. Well, the police are trained, by the way. They are trained. Again, the problem is that departments have to root out the bad cops. See, there's a system in place now where these cops, they hop from one police department to another. So they get fired from Cincinnati, and they popped up in Cleveland, and they're hired, and their past records be damned. And so they have to stop that practice. If a cop is running from a department, you shouldn't be hired. A former cop shouldn't be hired at a new department because of a certain violations, certain issues that the previous department had with that police officer. And to me, that's part of the problem. I mean, when I went, the police invited the press corps once to their training ground where you in a simulation and you have a gun and all these people are popping up in front of you. There was a lot of reporting shooting people left and right there because a lot of the people we were shooting at didn't have a gun. So that was a little training to show you sort of like their way to get back at us when we're criticizing them for using force. But that was one day for us. That's not my job. I'm not a cop. It was just one training. So I was not supposed to react the same way that you do. But the bottom line is to me, it's a matter of policing bad police officers. Get rid of them. Have them do anything else, except because they're not fit for this job. Yeah. If they've shown that their inability to treat people with respect, courtesy, as a logo.
Professionalism, CPR. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And also one thing, I think one of the bundles and this defund the police, that was a bad slogan, because the idea is not even to defund the police. The idea is to fund other programs that would help the police for anything. I mean, everything. The police have to be present. Why? So you need maybe mental health experts to come to talk to somebody, because a lot of those cases are people with mental health issues. They're having some, they didn't take the medication for whatever reasons, or they just, snap. And they don't need force at that point. Force is not going to subdue it. You're going to make the situation worse. You need a mental health counselor there with the police, but taking the lead, and the police watching, making sure that the situation doesn't get, dangerous for the person. And that should be their role, the backup role. But the front role should be professionals who can deal with this crisis at hand and diffuse it. The police are there to control the situation, okay? They have their tools at their hands, but ultimately they want you to shut up and listen to them. And if you don't shut up, then they're gonna handcuff you. And it's during that process that bad things happen.
Mm-hmm. It's very revealing, right? We'll have to see what folks say about the defund the police being a bad slogan.
But I don't think that was the intention was not that, frankly.
Yeah, no, I understand how it could be a misnomer. So we have a couple of questions here for you, Abner. One is, does your work focus directly with the police, or who else do you work with in your efforts to try to have the police do better?
Not one group in particular. Anywhere that having needs that I can make a difference, whenever I receive the call, I always then say it.
Okay, that's wonderful that you're so accessible. The other question we have, this one might be a little tougher, is it possible to take the embedded racism out of policing in America? Est-ce qu'il est possible pour capable retirer sens racisme dans genre où police yo traite mon ici?
Bon, ça c'est un problème du système qui est lié. Li pa un bagay ko ka pral attaquer comme ça pour dire pour résoudre des jours à demain. Li prend un paquet de sensibilisation, un paquet de travail qui doit faire, parce que il y a des gens qui racistes, c'est pas même qu'on pour ça le raciste. Il y a des gens qui racistes qui ni racistes. Avec des fois nous capable comprendre ça. Parce que des gens li fin faire un bagay après ça l'homme dit pour ça le faire li dit li pas connaît juste faire. Des ti moun nan tout gen doit lever le parent raciste, et pour lui même lever le raciste, c'est pas même comme ça raciste on veut dire. Ça veut dire que si il prend tout ton travail qui ensemble qui doit faire, côté que non seulement n'a sensibiliser ça qui déjà là dans déjà pour les comme ça, pour même les yo pas qu'à la place pour, mais pour faire yo prendre sens si yo en place pour comme yo t'a senti yo les tel on bagay comme ça passer yo en peu là parfois il y a bien prendre conscience, il y a réaliser vraiment faut mettre un aide là parce que grand pile monde qui te kon faire les et puis qui dit vraiment bon yo pas obligé faire comme ça encore, il a changé.
So, in a sense, c'est comme si on t'a dit que le problème là, c'est pas seulement racisme, c'est pas un problème police seulement lié. C'est pas comme si société en est, right?
C'est toute société à cause ça.
Societal problem, not a policing problem specifically in terms of just racism. Do you want to weigh in on that a little bit, Gary?
I think Abner said it very articulately, and I don't want to mess it up by adding anything. So that people forget what he just said.
Yeah.
What I think is that, Abner, I have a question for you. In 1997, you are not only a symbol of a victim of police brutality, but you were a symbol of the Haitian community. You were sort of like the one of the biggest, for lack of a better term, prominent, one of the most prominent Haitians in the community, in the country, in the world. Did that ever weigh on you? Did you ever think about that and what all that means?
I think about it every day. And although I met different people, different group, some of them, sometimes they even ask me to go on politics, to run for office, but I tell them politics is not for me because I don't like politics. And so I can help somebody get elected. I can push them to pass some laws. I can tell them this is what I want, this is what my community wants. But as far as me personally, no, I don't see myself there. But I never say never, because sometimes if God wants, that's what God wants. Mm-hmm. That's why I cannot say never. But for me personally, I can say no.
So I have a follow-up question for you. You mentioned, people running for political office. What is your perspective on the current leadership in the community and the work in regards to like what they're doing to address racism, social justice, and those issues? Are they doing, how do you find the work they're doing?
Well, so far, they've been doing what they're elected for, but as far as talking about racism, I think they're scared of the words. And this is the problem that we're facing, because you're not supposed to be scared of the words. It's the words that you live with it and you know it exists. It's like you're sick, but you don't want to go to see a doctor because you just know you don't want the doctor to find out, tell you exactly what's wrong with you while you know you're sick. You live in a denial. And that's not the way you should take it. Racism exists. We must teach our kids, our children about racism, what racism is all about, and we have to take it as is. If it's racist, it's racist.
So you think they should call out racism more often when they see it? Is that the takeaway?
Most definitely, because I'm sure that there's certain people that doesn't really want to be seen like racist, even if they are. But if you try to hold them accountable for their racist remarks they make or stuff like that, and some of them will think twice before they say something.
Okay. And what else do you think some of the leaders of our community, elected or otherwise unelected, what else can they do to make sure that some of the suggestions you have around making sure people know how to stay safe in interactions, right? Making sure they understand the criminal justice system. What can leaders do to help pass on that knowledge and help empower the community?
I believe our leaders, but I cannot call them leaders because they just elected official for me, because I can call them leader because a leader is a leader. When a leader have to take the lead, you have to look out for your community, for your people. And as far as I'm concerned, they're not really looking out for their people or neither. I cannot call them leader. And if what I can suggest them to do, at least they're in a position on power. Use that power, use your office to make a difference, especially for your community. Those that doesn't speak English, create some program for them, at least to teach them about the society they're living, what to expect, where their rights start, where it's end. They could do that. That will help our community and our people to grow.
On dit ça en créole tout le monde, s'il vous plaît, Abner.
Bon, je pense que l'important pour moun qui nous gagne qui élu qui dans poste pour ta penser avec communauté pa yo même, parce que nous c'est des problèmes dans la communauté noire qui existait. Parfois on rencontre ces étrangers qui essayer parler de yo. Je pense que yo capable utiliser office que yo occupé, job que yo gagne, pouvoir que yo gagne, non seulement pour créer programme qui pour aider l'autre jeune nous surtout ça qui pas parler que mais ça qui c'est des petits jeunes tout qui viennent de l'école qui ou l'ange juvénal c'est interruption c'est des petits jeunes 16 15 14 ans qui en prison. Parfois eux même yo pensent que la vie est finie, des programmes qui là ou capable moi même faire ça plusieurs fois parler avec vous faire qu'on est bon. On erreur qui mette au côté ça va veut dire la vie est finie pour ça. yo capable tête on seconde chance pour que demain si éveillé yo capable venir au meilleur monde dans la société à côté société a besoin yo et la vie pas fini mais il y a des programmes comme ça me pense que yo t'a dû faire.
Est-ce que vous pensez que pour nous-mêmes haïtiens, right? Nous déjà noirs plus nous immigrants, nous parlons en langue différente. Est-ce que vous pensez ça bon nous ça vient faire nous comme si plus bon nous plus possibilités pour nos victimes? Like, are we more vulnerable because we're Black immigrant Haitians? Do you think?
Ça va nous un désavantage. C'est ça qui fait l'important pour nous-mêmes qui avons possibilité d'utiliser les plateformes nous pour nous éduquer peuple nous, éduquer monde ça yo pour yo connaître bien même côté yo gagne des avantages là mais yo gagne avantage tout. Qui ça qui avantage yo et côté yo ka aller pour yo prendre avantage pa yo.
Yeah, so that's a lot of work to be done there to figure that out. Gary, we have a question for you because you had mentioned, you know, your coverage of Anthony Bias's death and killing, right? The person here who wrote in says, despite Black Lives Matter, she, Claudia is her name, does not see enough Latinos or massive amounts of Latinos joining with the Black community to address and fight against police brutality. You know, what could be some of those factors? Race, colorism, immigration status. This is a question for a sociologist, frankly, but I wonder if you have a perspective.
Well, I kind of disagree with the premise of the question because I think Latinos have been really involved in the fight against police brutality. Like I said, mentioning the Bias family, there were a bunch of others as well. I just forgot their names. And when you know you see protests all over the city, all over the world for that matter, I mean, I saw strong Latino presence. Perhaps it's a Puerto Rican centric because Puerto Rican are much more liberal or progressive than some other newer immigrant groups that, you know, who are kind of not at the stage yet where they feel comfortable to get on the street to protest like we were maybe 30 years ago or 40 years ago, whenever. So I just don't agree with the premise that Latinos are not participating, far from it.
Yep, that's a fair point. We're almost at wrap up, but we have to talk a little bit about our community's relationship with the police in Haiti, right? Like our history with Haiti and how that impacts how we interact with the police here. Est-ce que ouais quelques façon que gens policiers ensemble avec nous en Haïti, histoire nous ensemble avec, you know, police comme force que le gouvernement utilise pour faire tout pour nous être en ligne. Est-ce que ça affecte les gens nous y ensemble avec police ici?
Bon, moi pense oui. Parce que ça fait partie de l'éducation, nous, façon que nous sommes éduqués, façon que nous levons, culture, nous. Nous toujours parfois besoin de pression pour nous marcher. Par exemple, pour mon ici là les filles mangent un bagage, pour chercher une poubelle pour laguer. Fatra, tandis que même mon ça arrive à Haïti, les filles mangent les laguer de l'autre côté. Parce que les connaît les sites là qui ont l'autre culture. Yo ka find les pas faire les sites là. Je pense que les prend toute une chaîne travail qui doit faire non seulement pour nous motiver mais pour nous apprendre d'abord même les nous c'est une culture esclavagiste mais nous pas esclaves pour ça. Nous considérons bagaille nous pas obligés de tolérer mais nous devons faire avec respect une pour l'autre.
Okay, Gary, anything to add to that as far as our history with the police in Haiti and how that might translate here with our interactions with police?
Well, we don't have much of a history of interaction with the police in Haiti. What we have interaction with the shock troopers in Haiti, the Tontomacoutes, and those types. That's like paramilitary groups. But the Haitian
not
police,
really to protect and serve. Huh?
No.
There's no CPR in Haiti.
Ironically enough, the police in Haiti are weak, as you know, you published in the Haitian Times about the state of the national police. This is not a force that can engage in police brutality, far from it. And so our issue has always been with the paramilitary groups, from Totomaku to FRAP, to now we have gangs, which is another level. But yeah, that's a discussion.
Yeah, it is really different. So here's one last question, and then we'll move to wrap up or to add anything else you'd like to add. When I think about, all the characters from 1997 through, I guess, 2004, it took so long, right, for the case to wrap up. And I think about like Giuliani, which we touched on earlier today. Tell me, Abner, what you thought of Giuliani at the time and what you think of him now, knowing what we all know over the past 25 years about him, what we've seen.
Knowing what we all do, it's always equal of himself. So, Lord Giuliani, ou c'est un monde qui est égal à tête, qui est égal à lui-même. Tout ce qu'on pense qu'il est capable de faire, il est capable de faire. Pas de capable de pas surprise.
Gary, can we dig into that a little bit more? Yeah, because Giuliani, right? He was such a name, such a figure back in the late 90s in New York City, right? And he had the police out, and it was the whole idea of broken windows, quality of life, all of this stuff. There was real fear in our communities when it came to the police coming in, At some point they had like impact zones. I think that was under Bloomberg, but the idea of just like how Giuliani represented the state, to me as a younger person was just like, wow, these people really aren't playing. When they say they're coming out and the vans start, grabbing people and throwing them in and taking them downtown, that was really fearful. Now we see, Bernard Carrick, all these people who were part of just like the establishment, right? And now we see them being subject to all these investigations, all of these like personal, histories, and I won't even go into those. It just seems like in a lot of ways the idea of them has diminished, quite a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look at what Giuliani has become a caricature. Bernard Carrick went to prison. A bunch of others really, because the problem, we talk about it as well, is starts at the top. And I think the mayor has a role to play in all of this. And if you have a mayor who's tolerant of bad police officers, then you have a problem. No matter how much training you give them, they'll always act because they know they have the support of the mayor. Mm-hmm. And most of these players from 1997, Abner and I were young men back then, and look at us, it's all full gray. I'm like, full gray. And so, I've gotten a little older, and then at retirement age, but here we are still fighting the same thing. And McAfee, I remember the last case, we didn't talk about this, that I covered before I left the New York Times, was Amadou Diallo. And those guys, that crew that killed him, they call themselves "We Own the Night." Yeah. So basically, they take that's thuggish language to me. That's not police work, because we know you're on the street, you're the police. So if you have to have a crew that's underscoring that fact, then what are you up to? Well, we found out what they were up to. There's so many. I mean, this issue, as a reporter, I've been covering this since the beginning of my career in Fort Lauderdale, and bad policing, and it's still happening
everywhere.
Yeah.
It's everywhere. We have a couple questions about policing in Haiti. I guess we opened the can of worms with that one. You guys have a couple minutes. One, we have Ms. Asime asking, what programs can us in the diaspora offer to train officers to protect and serve? This is something I think we tried back in the early 2000s, right? Like retraining police in Haiti. The NYPD went down there even and all of that. So what can you say about that question, Gary?
Well, it's a very good program. It was really doing its intended purpose. But then 4 years ago, Trump discontinued the program. The program was that NYPD officers, and I went down to Haiti for a period of time. They were on a rotation. They would work hand in hand with the Haitian National Police to help them with tactics, to give them training, to work with them, go out and give them best practices and stuff. Again, the police in Haiti are the weak link in what's happening now. In fact, they are outgunned by gangs. And so, they need more support to do their job. And they've been badly politicized. The president, I mean, I don't want to get too much into the Haiti police situation, but
yeah, you can read the Haitian Times for that.
President Jovenel Moïse chose a police chief, but he hasn't allowed the police chief to do his job. And the moment you politicize a police force is the moment you don't have a police force anymore. And this is what's happening in Haiti right now.
That's totally fair. Yeah. So Abner, what else would you like to say for us today, right? Like, it's been 24 years since your case, 24, 25 years. And
almost
now
24.
you're almost, right? And now you're looking at the next generation of your kids that you mentioned coming up. You're still worried about when your family members go out, are you going to get that call? What would you like to be able to see or say in another 24, 25 years when it comes to policing?
Well, it's my wish, at least, not only 24, 25 years, but as of now, for things to change, that I don't have to worry. When my kids go out, I have to worry less than the way I'm worried when they're out now. But most importantly, I would love to see a better society while everyone is equal, and my grandkids will grow up without fear for anything.
That's excellent. Is there anything that you think is an immediate solution individual police or individual departments can take to actually start making a difference in their communities?
Well, every department can start improving and to make change, improve certain change without waiting for the law to force them to do certain things. There's a lot of things they can do to improve the way they're policing, and also to identify the communities that they're policing for. Because sometimes, like, by example, we Haitians, sometimes we have a tendency when we're speaking, we do some movement with our hands. And if a police doesn't know our culture, when we do that, he probably think that we're fighting or we're resisting, but it's not the case. It's the way that when we speak, we do some movement with our hands.
Et nous parler fort en pile quelquefois.
Yes.
Right? Et mais qui ça nous a dit moun yo? Pas parler fort, quitter nous en bas, pas rien, ou comme si fait police la senti la vie lui-même li en danger.
Meilleur bagay là, c'est qu'on est en situation de non-retour, ou à chercher moyen pour survivre seulement. Et ou gen un seul moyen pour survivre, c'est obéir à tout ça que yo dit, et malgré pas obéir à tout ça que yo dit là, ou gen chance pour pas survivre. Mais ou gen plus chance pour survivre si que obéir à tout ça yo dit.
Gary, what are your thoughts on anything that police departments or individual police could do in the immediate term, right? Without it having to take laws and a whole systematic approach to start making a difference for our communities in a positive way.
But in some ways, I'm not sure there's a magic bullet, if pun intended, because the problems are profound. And also, crime is real. Right now, the country, I don't know what's happening in our minds post-COVID, the crime situation out of control. And so in that sense, we do need to work with the police. And so this is a very high wiring act, you balance it, because then, the police, they say the morale is low because, Black Lives Matter movement, they've been demonized and all of that. So, they're not going to do their job. Well, of course they don't say that, but, there are a lot of people who are really questioning, this rise in crime and its root cause, and there are some who think that conversations like we're having is part of, you know, the police reaction. They don't want us to talk about them the way we are because, you know, in the past, you know, we've had protests like Abner said, we've done this, but never have we had a soul searching about the police. And I think this is what's happening. Every community, I mean, Asians, everyone been victimized by the police. It's like enough already. So this is a moment, and we have to be very careful. And leaders and politicians have to be really, really careful not to try to make us victimize us twice. You know, we get victimized by criminals and then by police who, for whatever reason, don't want to, are not as doing their job the way they're supposed to send a message. Because I'm afraid that is what's happening right now. But then the powers that be have to really step up to the plate and deal with that situation as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I heard that theme earlier too when Abner was talking about the leaders, right? Elected or elected officials have to do what they have to do to call out racism. I think that's an important point that you made, and we have to hold them accountable for that. In terms of like other themes we heard tonight, definitely Abner, you said obéir, depuis police lan di ou fè tel bay, make sure obéir pou kapab gen yon chans, pou kapab soti nan interaksyon ensemble avec you. The other things we heard was policing is tough, like Gary said. It is a job though. No one is forcing a police officer to take on that job and do it. So if you're doing it, do it with all the knowledge, the training, and the empathy, right? For all people that you're coming into interaction with. I think that's something Abner suggests to different police circles and academies where he talks, is to help them understand culturally how people are feeling as soon as they're stopped by the police, and how the police can do a better job of being more respectful, if you will, during those interactions, right? And yeah, overall, just keep up the pressure with elected officials, those that have the power to change the laws. We have to go there and make sure that our voices as Haitian Americans, as Black people in this country, our voices are heard, and that the changes made actually benefit our community. So any final words before we wrap by both of you?
My final word is thank you for having me, and thank you for offering me your platform at least to speak to, especially my community. Pepam nan, spécialement mon New York moyo, parce que m'te fait choix pour mon quitter Florida, peut-être petit moyo surtout, parce que m'pas voulais vraiment vie qui New York là pas la bon pour être trop jeune, il va te préparer pour ça. Mais toujours New York toujours dans kem et toujours participer dans tout pile bail qu'a fait.
Okay, merci Abner.
D'accord.
Well, I wanted to thank you, Abner, for agreeing to talk. This is really enlightening, and we hadn't heard from you in a long time. We think that, you know, one thing I think about a lot, how, you know, back in the 90s, and there were only a handful of prominent Haitian people. Many of those who were prominent sort of like sought the limelight, but you didn't. And it was a difficult situation to have been just like a regular guy, hanging out, loving, going to the bars on the weekend, and then all of a sudden to not be able to walk the streets and hang out the way you used to. And I've always thought about how somehow it was kind of unfair. But you've held yourself with a lot of grace and dignity. And we want you to stay involved in the community because your experience is unique and your story needs to be retold every 5 years so the generations that are coming would know about you and not thinking that the latest victim of police brutality was it. This is like George Floyd was not the first one. And it's really important because this is a long conversation. I mean, because, you know, we can never come away with the answer because we're human, it evolves, it's human interaction, it's sociology, it's psychology, it's all of that and then some. So thank you so much, Abner, for your being with us tonight.
My pleasure.
Thank you all so much. And on that note, we'll end with a quote from Gary's story when he interviewed Abner at the hospital so many years ago. Abner said, you know, this is intolerable. I think everyone should be an advocate against police brutality. And I think that still rings true today. And so we urge all of you watching who were able to join us today, those of you who watch the recordings later, to take that to heart and be an advocate for yourself and for your community against police brutality. We all have work to do, so let's get it done. And when you do it, it happens. We will talk about it on HaitianTimes.com, on our platforms. Please join us and follow us and definitely engage with us. Thank you all again for joining us. My name is Mackle Neal. We'll see you next time. Thank you.